Welcome to night. We're stepping into the baffling, rigid, and oddly sticky universe of Victorian parenting. A realm so strict, so laden with rules, and so casually dangerous that many of its everyday practices would land you in serious trouble with modern authorities. If you've ever wondered what childhood looked like, in an era when teething was soothed with whiskey and discipline might involve a sturdy wooden spoon, you're in the right place. Before settling in, feel free to like this. If it speaks to you, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Bonus points if your own childhood featured cod liver oil, brisk sponge baths, or a distant relative who swore leeches could cure anything. I read every one, mostly because sleep and I have a complicated relationship. Now, dim the lights. Turn on a fan for that soft hum of white noise and wrap yourself in a cozy blanket. Victorian parents would have insisted you wear 3 layers, regardless of the weather, just in case of a draft. But let's pause. Did parents really suspend baby cages from apartment windows? What did children actually eat? And why did it always seem to be some shade of gray? Was children should be seen and not heard, treated like sacred law? How many tragedies unfolded before anyone thought to put child-proof caps on poison bottles? And why did go play with the arsenic ever seem like acceptable advice? Imagine waking up in the heart of Victorian London. You're young still, small enough to be under constant supervision. Your nanny has a mustache. Your mother offers you a spoonful of something called soothing syrup. Good luck. Step inside the nursery, a room overflowing with ruffles, rattles, and rules, but strangely few actual toys. The wallpaper peels in faded pinks and greens. Every surface carries a faint film of stickiness, possibly porridge, possibly the family cat. The air carries the scent of boiled milk, old dolls, and a dubious disinfectant that may do more harm than good. Morning light barely filters through heavy lace curtains. Their trim elaborate enough for a wedding gown. You're barely conscious, and already you're being inspected first by your nanny, then by a rotating cast of elderly relatives who drop by mainly to critique your posture and offer unsolicited medical theories involving rickets. The floor is scattered with alphabet blocks, marbles, and the occasional crust of dry bread, a hazard rivaling the household medicine cabinet. You shiver not just from the chill, but from the weight of unspoken nursery commandments. Rule 1, never walk, always tiptoe. Rule 2, toys are for display, not play unless you're demonstrating the proper reverence for holding a wooden hoop, which must be done as if handling a religious artifact. Rule 3, dolls must remain fully clothed at all times or risk moral censure from your aunt, the unofficial guardian of childhood virtue. The play area is a vague rectangle defined by a fraying rug, a broken abacus, and what might once have been a rocking horse, now missing an eye and several limbs. Here, you're expected to play quietly and creatively, which really means no laughter, no running, no mess, and absolutely no wild imagination. At any moment, an adult might appear in the doorway to remind you that idle hands belong to the devil. So you quickly pretend to embroider a handkerchief. You secretly plan to bury later. At the room's center looms the nurse's chair, not for sitting, but for surveillance, interrogation, and the occasional upright nap balanced atop a tray of cod liver oil and a stiff bristled hairbrush. Nanny reigns over this miniature kingdom. A general armed with flawless etiquette, secret drawer of calming tonics, and an uncanny radar for detecting fun from several rooms away. Your toys? Perhaps a wooden soldier missing an arm, or a doll with porcelain cheeks, glass eyes, and a gaze that's surely witnessed at least one minor crime. If you're fortunate, they're kept locked away not for safety, but to keep joy at a manageable distance. Once in a while, you're allowed the Noah's Ark set provided you swear not to drown the camels again. Through the window, you glimpse other children being marched in neat lines through the garden, guided by adults who wield umbrellas like ceremonial weapons. You ache to join them, but first, you must endure your lessons, reciting moral verse, perfecting penmanship, and practicing curtsies for imaginary royalty. On good days, you're permitted to sit in the window cage, breathing in the sharp temps of city air while suspended high above the neighbor's laundry line. The nursery isn't really a room, it's a crucible. Every comfort comes with risk. Every treat is a trial. Every hug arrives wrapped in a lecture about fortitude. Childhood here isn't about wonder, it's a prolonged audition to become the miniature, impeccably behaved adult. Survive until supper without being accused of moral decline or unexplained stickiness. And you've had a winning day. Breakfast arrives as a pale, lumpy mass Victorian mothers insist is nourishing, but feels more like emotional surrender in bowl form. Sugar is rare. Flavor is suspect. On lucky mornings, you might find a raisin, though it could just as easily be a fly. The table is arranged with military precision. Heavy drapes block the sunbeam, 'cause heaven forbid light expose the culinary despair before you. Your hands are raw from yesterday's cold water ablution, and you stare into your bowl as it stares back, thick, sullen, and utterly devoid of hope. Siblings sit in silence, each locked in a private battle with their portion. Breakfast isn't for chatter, it's for endurance. Conversation is only acceptable in Latin, or when correcting someone's fork grip. The only sounds are the rustle of a newspaper, the sigh of a dog who's learned not to beg, and the soft scrape of spoons against porcelain. You take a bite, it tastes like wet paper and resignation. The substance is gray, lumpy, sometimes translucent. Ask what's in it, and you'll hear goodness. Over time, you realize that's code for whatever was left over. Butter, reserved for guests. Jam, locked away, rationed by the teaspoon. Only after surviving serious illness. Sugar is spoken of like myth, whispered about at holidays. Glimpsed floating on Christmas, pudding like a distant dream. On special occasions, birthdays, royal anniversaries, or the rare moment someone in the household smiled genuinely, you might get an extra spoonful of oats or a bruised apple shared among 5. Otherwise, variety exists only in texture. Some days it's thin enough to drink, others so dense it could hold up a wall. Either way you eat it. Adults preach the moral virtue of plain fare. It builds character, they say, handing you a spoon that doubles as a disciplinary tool. It balances the humors. They add never mind your humors crave cinnamon and warmth. French toast is treated like a moral contagion. Cruciately decadence is blamed for societal decay. Penny papers advertise miracle breakfast powders, promising vigor and glowing skin, but your mother remains unmoved. Our secret, she insists, is daily discomfort. You start to suspect? Your ancestors survived sheerly out of spite. After this ordeal, you're sent off, fortified only by the certainty that the day can't possibly get worse. If you manage to pocket a stale crust or a sliver of cheese, consider it luxury. Just don't get caught. Gluttony lectures await those who snack between meals. By the end, you're scrubbed, subdued, slightly underfed, and ready to memorize more cautionary tales before fainting from boredom by midday. In this world, breakfast isn't the most important meal. It's the first test in a lifelong obstacle course called proper upbringing. Reaching lunch feels like divine intervention. Victorian childhood is a masterclass in invisibility. Children should be seen and not heard. echoes through every hallway. Your role is to blend into the wallpaper, avoid creaky floorboards, and pray no one calls on you during dinner. One ill-timed giggle, and you're banished with only Moro. Poetry for company. You move through the house like a cautious specter step, only on the rug runner. Never the loose board, and absolutely never trip over the footstool. If you must sneeze, do it into your pinafore with an apologetic expression. Coughs are muffled. Hiccup forbidden. Drop something. Best invent time travel to undo it before adult eyes notice. The drawing room is a minefield. You're technically allowed inside, but only if you sit statue still and radiate the energy of a decorative fern. Hands folded, gaze lowered. Eyes averted from the biscuit, tray tempting as forbidden laughter. Posture is policed relentlessly. Slouch, and Aunt Prudence delivers a sigh that ruins your entire week. Dinner is your final exam. Adults debate wars, sermons, or household budgets while you chew in silence, eyes on your plate. Resisting the gravies, cauliflower dressed, your reply must be crisp, polite, and grammatically flawless. Yes, father. No, mother. I deeply regret mentioning amphibians at table. Jokes are permissible, only if they quote Greek myth or involve a tasteful pun about sherry. Otherwise, silence. Being ignored is a privilege. The less you speak, the safer you are. You, master. The neutral face, the one that says, I am content. I am obedient. And I am absolutely not plotting to hide under the piano. Laughter is suppressed. Questions about Cousin Edgar's hedgehog hair go unasked. Singing, out of the question. Joy is ration permitted only on the Queen's birthday or upon spotting an actual hedgehog in the garden. Occasionally, you're trotted out to recite poetry or list monarchs backward, a performance disguised as honor, really a test. Stumble on a line, and you'll return to the nursery with extra penmanship drills and a stern reminder about the sanctity of silence. Punishments for noise are swift and inventive. There's the reflection, chair facing a print of a weeping angel. Solitary re-inga. But the most Victorian penalty of all. The lecture, delivered slowly, gravely, often by your father or a passing neighbor. How silence cultivates virtue. How noisy children end up in debtor's prison. And how opinions are dangerously continental. You nod, apologize, vow to whisper for a week. As candlelight wanes and the house hushes, you tiptoe back to the nursery, finally free to exhale, whisper a secret to your stuffed bear, and celebrate another day survived without being heard. In Victorian England, invisibility isn't just useful, it's the only reliable survival skill. Your nanny is the true sovereign of this realm. Sharp-eyed woman in starched black whose gaze alone can quell a tantrum. Part guardian, part warden, possibly part raven. She patrols with keys, clinking, like warning chimes, and a medicine chest, stocked with enough laudanum and soothing syrup to tranquilize a horse. From the moment you stir, you're on her schedule. Mornings begin not with leisure, but with her brisk footsteps, a sound that sends dust bunnies fleeing and children diving under blankets. She knows every hiding spot, every fake sleep trick, every lump that isn't a pillow. Resistance isn't. Just pointless, sits noted in her mental ledger. She rarely raises her voice. She doesn't need to. A single look from those owlish eyes, and you're confessing to future crimes? Legends swirl. She once separated feuding twins with a frown. Rumor claims she made a neighbor's dog apologize for barking during nap time. The nursery runs on ironclad routine. Lessons, walks rain or shine, handwriting, recitations. And constructive play all designed to forge moral fiber from cold porridge and rote memorization. Spare time. She'll hand you a dust rag and extol the joys of cheerful industry. Then there's the medicine, chest Victorian Pandora's box of elixirs, cordial of calm, essence of nettle and briskness. Toothache? Laudanum? Restlessness, soothing syrup, cough. A murky draft tasting of regret and old leather. Side effects include drowsiness or brief visions of the afterlife. You learn to feign perfect health rather than risk another dose. Yet, in rare moments, if you recite flawlessly, she might read aloud, usually a cautionary tale where joy is punished and tidy shoes lead to salvation. On calm afternoons, she might unlock the special toy box, battered blocks, a puzzle missing half its pieces. You catch a glint in her eye. It's likely gaslight, but you let yourself hope. Discipline is rarely physical. Instead, she wields psychological precision. A lecture on the fate of unruly children, a pointed glance at the family Bible, or the chilling silence that drops the nursery temperature by 10 degrees. And she knows everything. Lost a button? She knows. Hid vegetables under the cushion? She knows. Whispered about her mustache? Oh, she knows and will bring it up at the worst possible moment. You'll spend your youth tiptoeing around her. But years later, you'll realize, because of her, you can fold hospital corners, quote Tennyson, and function on minimal sleep. In Victorian England, that wasn't just childcare, it was preparation for anything history might hurl your way. Bathing is a weekly ritual, whether you feel the need or not. You're marched to a tin tub in the kitchen, scrubbed with carbolic soap that feels like sandpaper soaked in pine, and reminded to be grateful you're not being rinsed in vinegar. Cold water builds character along with mysterious rashes. Bath night carries the gravity of minor surgery. Kettles clatter, fires sputter. The tub gleams like a warning in the kitchen. Siblings exchange, resigned. Glances none, eager to go first, too cold, or last to. Used closing parenthesis. Victorian efficiency dictates shared bathwater. Conservation is land, a convenient excuse for why you still smell faintly of turnips on Thursday. The adult-in-charge nanny or mother stands ready with that infamous soap, touted as modern marvel but experienced as mild torture. Rinsing is slow, as if water is precious, which of course it is. Air washing is rare save for lice outbreaks or royal events. Otherwise, vigorous brushing stimulates the roots, which mostly spreads the itch evenly. Complain, and you'll hear about Great Aunt Bessie, who bathed once a year and lived to 93, likely out of sheer defiance. Towels are thin, perpetually damp, and rough as burlap. You rubbed briskly, left pink and shivering, then bundled into a nightshirt, fresh meaning only that it survived 3 previous children, and hasn't yet developed consciousness. Hair is tightly plaited, not just for neatness, but as a medieval defense against vermin. Bath time ends with an inspection. Rashes dabbed with ointments, smelling of tar, cuts treated with iodine ore for drama. Straight gin. You're sent to bed tingling, burning, smelling faintly of whatever cheap flowers were available at market. Cleanliness isn't guaranteed by morning. You'll have found a mud puddle or unexplained stain, but that's fine. Conventional wisdom holds that a thin layer of grime wards off illness. Anyone who scrubs outside of bath night is viewed with suspicion, possibly foreign. Certainly eccentric. Still, bath night has its perks. A chance to overhear adult gossip, listen to the house's creaks, or float bread boats quickly confiscated. You emerge cleaner, slightly traumatized, but wearing another badge of Victorian survival. If you ever grumble about a chilly bathroom or lukewarm shower, remember, you could be waiting your turn in family-flavored bathwater, grateful just to escape with your skin intact. In this world, you don't aim for sparkling, you aim for presentable enough. And that's victory. The playroom is both paradise and peril. You might find a spinning top, a wooden hoop, or a doll whose glass eyes track your every move. Most toys are wooden, fragile, and bristling, with splinters crafted not for joy, but to teach resilience or introduce you to tetanus. You enter with cautious excitement, eyeing the toy chest like it might contain yesterday's questionable pudding. Victorian toys blend artistry with menace. The Jack-and-Knee box isn't cheerful, it's trauma in miniature. The rocking horse, paint peeling and limbs missing, sits like a dare in the corner. Toys follow a design philosophy best summarized as, may cause minor injury, but definitely builds character. Blocks become both architecture and ammunition. Marbles are beautiful and responsible for every chipped tooth in the house. Dollhouses are lavish, complete with tiny furniture and hidden hazards like pin-thin fireplace tools. Mechanical toys don't grow attached, they'll jam by tea time. And repair requires either a horologist or a child with no sense of self-preservation. And the dollzo, not cute, but haunting. Porcelain faces, glass eyes, expressions that whisper, I know what you did. Some even have real human hair-raising, more questions than answers. Sleep near one, and you'll wake convinced you've angered a spirit. Unwritten rules govern play. You may play, but not make a mess. Games must be educational or convincingly pretend to be. Blind man's bluff is frowned upon. Running is reckless. Laughter must be muted. Imagination is tolerated only if it doesn't lead to disorder. In the Victorian playroom, joy is permitted, but always under supervision, always within bounds, and never at the cost of neatness or propriety. It's childhood shaped not by wonder, but by restraint where even play is a rehearsal for adulthood. Encouraging chaos earns you a stern lecture, while quiet needlework might just win you a gold star. If you want to play catch, it must be with a tightly stitched regulation. Beanbag, preferably outdoors. And ideally under the watchful eye of a disapproving adult, clutching a handkerchief to their nose, like you've offended the very concept of fresh air in the corner of the playroom. Iron hoops for hoop rolling await a pastime that sounds charming until you realize it involves chasing a metal ring down a hallway lined with priceless vases and siblings who treat the game like a full-contact sport. Board games do exist, but they come with rule books, longer than legal statutes, and carry the ever-present risk of being accused of cheating. A transgression treated with the gravity of high treason, and yet, for all its perils, the playroom remains a rare sanctuary from the relentless moral instruction of the adult world. Here, you can stage epic battles with tin soldiers or throw a solemn tea party for your long-suffering teddy bear and the one-armed doll who's seen better centuries. Sometimes, when Nanny is distracted and the coast is clear, you dare to invent your own games, tossing caution and the occasional building block. To the wind, every playroom has its legends. The toy you're forbidden to touch, broken since some indeterminate year in the past, and awaiting repair that never comes. The sibling who supposedly swallowed a marble and lived to brag about it. The ghostly creak of the toy cupboard door that always seems to open just after lights out. Late at night, you and your brothers and sisters swap whispered tallies, each trying to outdo the other with stories of near-disaster daring rescues. And the infamous day Cousin Bertie sat on a spinning top and walked with a permanent wobble for weeks afterward. When playtime ends, you tidy up, pretending you weren't just commanding armies or negotiating peace treaties between rival dolls. Fingers are checked for splinters, knees for scrapes. And if you make it to supper without any obvious wounds or missing buttons, you count the day a success. In the Victorian playyard, fun and peril walk hand in hand. Survive the haunted gaze of porcelain dolls, dodge tetanus from rusty toys, and keep hold of your marbles, both literally and figuratively, and you're already ahead in the grand, unforgiving game of life, in a twist of logic that only makes sense in hindsight. Some city-dwelling parents suspended their infants in. The sight is almost dreamlike. Row upon row of soot-streaked brick buildings, each sprouting curious little wire enclosures from their windows, each containing a swaddled infant blinking suspiciously at the soot-choked sky. Parenting manuals, brim with warnings about stagnant indoor air, so naturally. The remedy is to hang your most precious possession several stories above the cobblestones as if displaying a potted geranium. Only this one wears a bonnet and occasionally wails in. Despair you, the baby, are wrapped in so many layers of wool, muslin, and well-meaning optimism that you resemble a plump root vegetable with eyes. Nanny carries you through the parlor past judgmental relatives and deposits you into the cage without ceremony. The latch clanks shut, and there you dangle, swaying gently above the street like a confused songbird. If you squint, you might spot Mrs. Pepperton's baby 2 windows over, chewing determinedly on a mitten and locking eyes with you in silent solidarity. The philosophy is straightforward. Fresh air is wholesome. Unfortunately, Victorian fresh air carries the bouquet of coal smoke. Horse manure, an industrial fog butt, it's believed to build rosy cheeks, strong lungs, and, with luck, immunity to every known respiratory ailment. Occasionally, the local physician strolls by, nods approvingly at the rows of airborne infants, and makes a mental note to advertise more cough syrup come winter. Weather is a minor detail. Rain, drape the cage in oilcloth. Snow, toss in a hot water bottle for company. Summer offers slight relief from frostbite, but now you're at the mercy of pigeons, who view your cage as prime nesting real estate. An uncle might suggest tucking in a sprig of lavender to deter flies. It never works. Life in the baby cage teaches resilience fast. You learn to treasure small mercies, the slow thaw of a frozen nose, the rumble of a distant omnibus, the rare crust of bread smuggled down by an older sibling through the bars. If you cry too loudly, neighbors lean out their windows, tutting and offering unsolicited advice about optimal cage angles for maximum health benefits. The system isn't foolproof. Stories circulate likely, exaggerated, of infants retrieved from hedges, tangled in laundry lines, or, in one notorious instance, discovered napping in the Lord Mayor's carriage after a gust of wind proved too enthusiastic. But usually, the cage holds. You're brought in sight, pink-cheeked, lightly dusted with soot, and praised for your robust constitution. As you grow, your relationship with fresh air becomes complicated. On one hand, it's credited for every minor triumph. Little Georgina never catches colds, thanks to her cage years. On the other, you flinch at wire mesh and shiver involuntarily whenever a window opens too wide. The family album holds a sepia photograph of you, bundled and suspended, captioned simply, "Our Little Skylark." The summer of '87. In the grand scheme of Victorian parenting, baby cages are both absurd and weirdly logical, born of genuine concern. Filtered through layers of bad science, urban necessity, and a profound misunderstanding of aerodynamics. If you survived your stint as human window dressing, you emerged tougher, breezier, and armed with stories no modern baby monitor could ever capture. Fresh air, they said, builds character. It also builds memories and, if nothing else, a lifelong wariness of ledges. Step out of line, and you'll meet the business end of a wooden spoon or the full force of a practiced glare. Corporal punishment is not just accepted, it's celebrated. As character building, the phrase, "spare the rod, spoil the child," is stitched onto every respectable cushion in the house. Victorian discipline is a curious blend of folklore, pseudoscience, and domestic theater. There are actual rules, long, meticulously written lists in elegant script, posted in the nursery, the kitchen, and possibly even the chicken coop. Rules about elbows off the table, shoes aligned with military precision, and a near devotion to punctuality. Break one, and you earn a warning. Look, break two, and you discover just how inventive Victorians could be when enforcing obedience. The disciplinary arsenal is formidable. Wooden spoons, canes, slippers, and the ever-hairbrush each reserved for specific offenses, from impolite giggling to the cardinal sin of talking back. Nanny can flick a duster with uncanny accuracy from across the room. Your mother's disapproval can be felt through walls and possibly neighboring burrows. Some households even maintain a punishment chair, an ornate, uncomfortable seat stationed in the hallway, placed directly beneath the portrait of the family's sternest ancestor. Offenders sit there in silence, contemplating their failings under the ancestor's unblinking gaze. Punishments are tailored to the crime. Spill milk, stand in the corner and recite the Lord's Prayer. Backward, you're especially unfortunate. Speak out of turn. Copy passages from the Book of Virtues until your hand seizes up. Run indoors. Endure a brisk outdoor march under Nanny's supervision. Timed with a pocket watch, renowned for its infallibility. But the ultimate threat, whispered in hushed tones among siblings, is early bedtime, a fate only marginally better than exile. To the coal cellar. Yet the true weapon of Victorian discipline isn't the road, it's shame. No one delivers a reprimand like a Victorian adult. A single sigh from mother can wither your spirit. A raised eyebrow from father makes you question your entire existence. Even the family dog gives you a look that says, "Really? This is what you've chosen?" Every misstep is dissected at supper-ran audience participation event, where you're expected to confess, repent, and vow never again to forget to curtsy to the umbrella stand. 4 truly scandalous acts tracking mud into the parlor or heaven. Big, giggling during prayer, you must stand before the family and explain yourself. Siblings suppress smirks, while grandmama stares as though your actions might single-handedly unravel Western civilization. And yet, in the warped logic of the age, all of this is for your own good. Discipline, they claim, breeds virtue, fortitude, and the stoic endurance needed to survive dinner with Aunt Prudence. The wooden spoon isn't Cruden's love, expressed through mildly traumatic life lessons and the firm belief that you'll thank me someday. Spoiler, you won't. For every swat, there are also rules about rewards. If you keep your shoes polished, your books dusted, and your younger sibling from consuming wallpaper paste, you might earn a toffee, a copper penny, or most thrilling of all, a rare word of praise. "Well done, father," says Anne. The phrase echoes in your heart until at least the next moral crisis. So you learn to tread softly, keep your thoughts to yourself, and develop an uncanny radar for approaching adults. You've become a master of reading rooms, calculating precisely how far you can push before the spoon appears. You even discover the art of negotiating lesser punishments, forcing to eat an extra helping of cold cabbage in exchange for skipping the lecture on unchecked enthusiasm. In the end, Victorian discipline is less about physical correction and more about the weight of unspoken expectations, rules memorized, broken at your peril, and eventually passed down with a sigh and a slightly worn spoon. Because history, like your mother's glare, never forgets. If you ever receive a sweet, savor it. You may not taste another until the next holiday. Sweets are rare, expensive, and almost always followed by toothache. Dentists, if you can find one, are armed with pliers, and mercy in short supply. The mere mention of a treat sends a hush through the household. You might glimpse a tin of barley sugar on the highest shelf, or catch a whiff of peppermint, drifting from the parlor signs that fortune is smiling upon you. Perhaps it's a birthday, a royal anniversary, or your mother has had an extra sherry and feels uncharacteristically generous. Anticipation is electric. You and your siblings gather in the drawing room, hearts pounding, eyes wide, each hoping to be chosen for a single jewel-like confection. Victorian sweets are objects of reverence and mild terror. Hard candies in alarming hues, wrapped by hand and displayed in glass jars like sacred relics. Turkish delight available only to the well-tutories under a blizzard of powdered sugar that induces sneezing fits. The local bakery offers sticky buns, treacle tarts, and, for the bold, candied violets. But the crown jewel is chocolate agretti, waxy rectangle best described as almost edible. Sweets are distributed with solemn ceremony. Mother meets out, barley sugar drops. Like communion wafers, each child receives exactly one to be sucked slowly. Biting is forbidden. The act of enjoying a sweet is contemplative, ideally accompanied by reading Pilgrim's Progress or listening to a cautionary tale about a boy who once ate two and was either struck by lightning or sent to bed without supper. Same difference. The joy is fleeting. Victorian confections are infamous for their dental consequences. Even before the sweet dissolves, you feel the familiar twinge in your malarzo, warning that the family dentist, who also shears sheep and performs minor hypnosis, will soon be required. Dentistry in this era is less medicine and more performance art. A toothache earns you a clove to bite on until the pain gives up. Persistent agony means a visit to Mr. Blackwell, whose toolkit includes rusty pliers, a bottle of gin, and what can only be called blind optimism. If you emerge with your teeth intact, you learn the strict etiquette of treats. Never eat in front of guests, never chew audibly, and never under any circumstances trade sweets for marbles, frogs, or the neighbor's cat. Sharing is encouraged. In theory, but in practice, every child develops elaborate hiding spots, hollowed-out books, old shoeboxes. The closest you get to regular sweetness is bread and jam, served on rare sunlit afternoons only when no adult is watching. Occasionally, the town fair arrives, and for one glorious hour, all rules vanish. Gingerbread men, toffee apples, and boiled sweets in impossible colors await. You gorge yourself without restraint, then spend the evening clutching your stomach, vowing never again. Until next time, in the end, sweets are more than food, they're fleeting moments of joy. The stuff of childhood legend and the origin story of your lifelong suspicion of anyone holding dental tools. Victorian treats may be scarce, but their memory and your dentist's bill lasts. For years off, to school you go, where you'll memorize times tables, recite Latin, and practice penmanship until your fingers cramp. Classrooms are drafty, teachers unyielding, and spelling errors punished with candlelit copywork. Victorian schooling is less about education and more about endurings. Your day begins with the sharp ring of a bell likely wielded by a headmistress, who finds joy in discipline. You enter through iron gates, shoes gleaming, hair parted with geometric precision, uniform starched into submission. The schoolroom itself is a monument to discomfort. Rows of splintery desks, leaky ink pots, black etched with the ghosts of past lessons. You take your assigned seat, no choosing for you, unless you fancy a lecture on the perils of individuality. Each desk holds a slate, a stub of chalk, and barely enough space to write your name without smudging. A draft snakes across the floor, curling your toes in your boots. You recite multiplication tables, breathe visible in the chill or in warmer months. Sweat quietly to avoid blurring your immaculate script. The curriculum is broad but uninspired. Times tables backward, moral poetry by rote. Sentence diagramming until language loses all meaning. Latin is taught with grim resignation as if mastering a dead tongue prepares you for life. Geography means memorizing lands you'll never see. History is a litany of kings, wars, and why the French cannot be trusted. Teachers act less as guides and more as sentinels in the daily battle between order and chaos. Mr. Snipe materializes behind you the moment your attention drifts. Miss Grimshaw spots a sloppy cue from across the room and assigns extra copywork without hesitation. Discipline is maintained with canes, dunce caps, and public humiliation, the ultimate shame. Excellence brings little reward, perhaps a gold star, a nod, or the dubious honor of cleaning the chalkboard. Failure, however, is met with swift, soul-crushing consequences. A single misspelling means half an hour writing, I must remember. I comes before E, except after C. Over and over, until the letters blur into existential dread. Lunch offers no reprieve. Cold bread, maybe cheese, or last night's mystery stew. There's no cafeteria, only a drafty hall and the hope your sandwich survived the prefect's boot. Playtime, when granted, means supervised marches or furtive games of marbles in the far corner. You return home, ink-stained, wrist aching, head full of facts, half true and wholly exhausting. Your handwriting is flawless, your obedience unquestioned, and your dreams haunted by Latin verbs and the ghost of the multiplication table. School isn't about discovery, it's about survival, conformity, and never, ever forgetting to write your name at the top of the page. Cough. Here's a syrup laced with alcohol, opium, and a pinch of optimism. Cuts. Slather on mercury ointment. The family medicine cabinet is a cabinet of horrors, a graveyard of no legal substances, none of whose purposes anyone truly understands. Victorian medicine is less science and more magical thinking. Every household keeps a cabinet that would make a modern pharmacist dial for help. This is the age of a little something for what ails you, where dosing is generous and side effects are ignored unless they're entertaining enough. For supper conversation, the first response to any ailment is always a syrup, a cough. Mother produces a thick brown potion smelling of a distillery's worst day. You ask what's in it? Goodness, she says. Word you've learned means whatever's left in the bottle, plus hope. The label, barely legible under syrup drips, boasts alcohol, opium, chloroform, and a dozen calming arbs. You take 2 spoonfuls and lie down. For the rest of the day, you're either asleep, floating, or composing odes to the wallpaper, scrapes. GET mercury ointment, applied by someone who believes antiseptic means it stings. Deeper wounds receive carbolic acid and a healing paste, whose main ingredients appear to be lard and optimism. Bruises, rubbed with goose fat or butter, because apparently pain is best countered by making yourself more appetizing. Nervousness is not permitted in children, but if you flinch it's under. You're dosed with Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, guaranteed to silence toddlers, horses, and possibly minors. Too much energy. Cooling powders, which promise to balance your humors but mostly induce naps and rashes. Colds bring mustard. Plasters, slapped on your chest like a knight's anointment, tanned garlic necklaces, to draw out illness, if that fails. The doctor arrives with his black bag, forceps, leeches, and the firm belief that if you're not bleeding, you're not healing. Stomach troubles earn digestive cordial, a polite term for flavored paint striper. Constipation? Castor oil punishment. So dreaded, it works through fear alone. Diarrhea brings rice gruel and a lecture on intestinal morality. The medicine chest holds wonders and terrors alike. Powders that fizz, ointments that burn, lozenges that glue your tongue to your teeth, and tonics promising vitality but delivering only a newfound appreciation for water. On rare, blessed days, you're given hot milk and told to sleep it off, not because it heals, but because you're finally left in peace. Illness in this era is both drama and communal event. Relatives gather to debate cures, swap stories of miraculous recoveries, often involving turpentine and firm talking tos, and offer conflicting advice. Recovery is incidental. What matters is that you've sampled half the apothecary's inventory and lived to tell the tale, possibly with superhuman resilience. Definitely with a rash. In the end, the best medicine is survival, a deep skepticism of anything labeled soothing. The only thing more dangerous than your nanny is your siblings. You forge fragile alliances, negotiate for closet space, and plot daring escape, always foiled by creaky stairs and your little brother's complete inability to whisper. The Victorian nursery is a war zone, draped in lace. Sibling life is equal parts chess match and free-for-all, complete with shifting loyalties, betrayals, and truces sealed over stale biscuits. Nothing is sacred. Turn your back, and your favorite top is in someone else's hands. Your prized marble vanished. Your secret sweet stash replaced with sticky fingerprints. Alliances shift with the presence of adults. The moment nanny enters, hostilities seize everyone, morphs into angels suddenly enthralled by embroidery or Latin declensions. The second she leaves, the real game begins. Whispers, nudges, and secret pacts. The eldest tries to rule with dignity until someone remembers where the confiscated cricket bat is hidden. Closet space is contested territory. The wardrobe, large enough for all, somehow becomes a battleground each morning. One shelf, for no discernible reason, is the most coveted reel. A state in the nursery. Victory is fleeting. Today you reign supreme. Tomorrow you're overthrown, your nightshirt missing. Your shoes filled with mysterious treasures, courtesy of the baby. Escapes are a favorite pastimes, sneaking to the kitchen for cake. Digging for treasure in the garden, usually last season's carrots. Success hinges on silence and teamwork. Failure is guaranteed by your little brother shouting now. At the worst possible moment, there's always a scapegoat, usually the youngest, who's bribed into confessing in exchange for immunity. Though, never trust. Betrayal is common. Share your sweet stash location and find it ransacked with a note. Better luck next time. Swear loyalty in the Great Curtain Fort War, only to be abandoned the moment dinner is called. Treaties are drawn in crayon, signed with sticky fingers, broken by sunset. You'll learn to negotiate bribing with buttons, sweets, or gossip about the new governess. But there are moments of unity. Nothing bonds siblings like a common enemy. Nanny's approaching footsteps. The dreaded cod liver oil, or a parental summons that bodes ill for all. Suddenly, squabbles vanish. You stand shoulder to shoulder, silent, wide-eyed, innocent. Evenings bring rare peace. Shared bedtime stories, whispered secrets, muffled giggles under scratchy blankets. You reminisce about past capers, plan future rebellions, and in unguarded moments, admit you'd be lost without your KO-conspirators. Victorian sibling-hood isn't for the faint of heart, but it's an education in survival. You leave childhood with strategic instincts, a healthy distrust of trade offers, and memories ranging from triumphant to traumatic. As you finally drift off, the sounds of soft snoring and quiet plodding fill the nursery, a nightly reminder that, for better or worse, you're all in this together. Victorian parents have advice for every occasion. From, don't read too much, or your eyes will fall out to swallow a cherry pit, and a tree will grow inside you. It's never comforting, usually alarming, and often based on something overheard at a funeral. Advice is dispensed like tea frequently. Seriously, and whether you want it or not, stand near a window. Lecture on drafts. That's how Cousin Percival lost his sense of direction. Leave with damp hair. Warning tale of a girl from Ipswich who was never the same again. Though no one recalls exactly what happened, only, life is a journey. Keep your shoes clean and your conscience cleaner, or the mysterious. Trust the postman, but never the post. You're warned about muddy puddles, unaccompanied walks, and speaking to anyone with a mustache after dusk. Despite the sheer volume of parental wisdom, you rarely receive practical advice, like how to dodge nanny's radar or what to do if you spill ink on your Sunday best. Instead, you master the art of the polite nod and the distracted yes, Father. All while privately plotting your next small rebellion. Yet, in their own anxious way, your parents mean well. Through a steady stream of folklore, superstition, and wishful thinking. They're trying to prepare you for a world they only half understand. Their guidance may be confusing, alarming, or occasionally absurd, but it becomes the background of your childhood. In Victorian England, safety, virtue, and a healthy dose of paranoia are never in short supply. The nursery walls are coated in lead-based paint. The curtains shimmer with arsenic-dyed fabric. Asbestos nestles in every cozy nook. It's a wonder anyone reaches adulthood. But at least you're protected from draft sand occasionally. From consciousness. Victorian interior design is best described as lethal elegance. Every object is a potential hazard, yet everything is tastefully coordinated. Each morning, you wake in a room painted in delicate shades of pistachio, rose, and that peculiar hue known as Victorian green, a color that, as it turns out, is just a polite way of saying contains enough arsenic to fell a small horse. It's charming in daylight. Less so when the wallpaper begins to peel, and you start wondering whether your headache comes from reading or from slowly inhaling your surroundings. The carpet, lush and patterned, conceals not only last year's pudding stains, but also generous vortices of mercury, added to achieve richer colors and a softer tread. The curtains billow gently, their deep greens and blues courtesy of chemical dyes like Paris green and Shields green, and famous for causing rashes, dizziness, and sudden fainting spells. You're told not to chew the drapes. No one warns the cat. The resulting vet bill is filed under acceptable childhood hazards. Your toys offer no refuge. Dollhouse furniture gleams with lead-based paint that flakes onto sticky fingers. Tin soldiers and alphabet blocks look innocent, lined up on the shelf until a rainy afternoon of boredom leaves you with a metallic aftertaste and vague nausea. Even the teething ring is carved from bone, ivory, or, on occasion, a scrap of whalebone dipped in leftover hall paint. if you trip, which you inevitably do. Thanks to rugs designed to slide at the slightest provocation you might brush against. The coal scuttle, dusted generously with powdered asbestos. This is considered modern. After all, asbestos wards off fire, insulates against cold, and is excellent for sealing cracks against miasmas. It just doesn't help with Aunt Mildred's endless stories about the Crystal Palace each night. You're tucked beneath a mountain of blankets, stuffed with materials of dubious origin. The mattress is a layered relic of horsehair feathers, and remnants from previous generations, all gently steeped in whatever deodorizing powder is currently fashionable. The pillows smell faintly of lavender and camphor knot for comfort. But to mask the slow chemical decay beneath, ventilation is a paradox. Windows jam shut in warm weather and shriek open in cold. Fresh air is both vital and suspect, so your parents strike a compromise. Crack the window a sliver, then pack the gap with asbestos wadding. You fall asleep to the soft rattle of our curtain cords and the distant murmurs of adults, debating whether yellow wallpaper is too cheerful for a child's moral development. It's not all doom. The upside of this pastel death trap is immunity. Survive your nursery, and household dust will never faze you again. Family legend claims your uncle once licked the wallpaper and lived to tell the tale, though he hasn't been quite right since. The cat, meanwhile, refuses to enter the room at all, preferring to lounge suspiciously in the hallway. Still, you can't help but feel a flicker of pride. Other children may have safe, modern nurseries, free of lead, arsenic, and asbestos. But do they have decor? This kept building. In the Victorian home, you don't just live with history. You inhale it, nibble on it, and sometimes wake to find it dusted on your pillow. In the end, it's all part of growing up robust, the Victorian euphemism for miraculously still breathing. Your parents read an article in Punch magazine, and suddenly your meals consist entirely of tapioca. The Victorian iradoresa diet. Crazy, especially if it involves boiled cabbage, toast water, or a medical endorsement from a man with impressive mutton chops. No meal is safe from the whims of culinary fashion. One day, breakfast is hearty porridge. The next, it's slippery elm gruel, recommended by a physician whose only credentials are bushy sideburns and a mysterious letter after his name. Lunch might shrink to invalid jelly, or the even more ominous beef tea, a phrase that promises richness but delivers warm, meaty water and the faint taste of regret. At the heart of every Victorian diet fad is the belief that food is not for pleasure, but for discipline. Flavor is frivolous. Variety is suspect. Anything delicious is accused of corrupting your moral fiber. Just as you grow fond of currant buns, they're denounced in the periodicals as threats to both soul and stomach. The family cook, tasked with interpreting these shifting doctrines, spends half her time boiling vegetables into submission, and the other half explaining why dessert now tastes like soap. There's always a new superfood, arrowroot, to soothe bowels and temper. Patent flour bread that's more digestible, if less edible, or pure beef, extract touted as a cure for melancholy, sore ankles, and possibly original sin. Mothers trade recipes for blancmange, with the same urgency modern parents share gluten-free snack hacks. You suspect half these foods were invented by investors in the tapioca trade. Medical endorsements are everywhere. Dr. Quim's digestive powders promise to transform cabbage into a delicacy and prevent intestinal up if the good doctor wears a velvet waistcoat and frowns sternly in advertisements. You'll be sampling his concoction by week's end. Your mother reads testimonials aloud. Since subsisting solely on cold stewed prunes, my digestion has never been more efficient. You eye the prune dish with deep mistrust. No Victorian diet is complete without water-based substitutes. Toast water-stale bread, steeped in boiling water, strained, and served lukewarm's a favorite. If you're fortunate, you get a dab of jam for color. Milk is boiled into oblivion. Even tea is sometimes tempered with vinegar, for the balance of your humors. Your personal favorite is cabbage, water or beverage seemingly designed to test. Filial loyalty. Special diets are tailored to children, too thin. Sewell pudding and large sandwiches, for a stretch, to plump. Raw carrots and barley gruel. There's a persistent suspicion that enjoyment is a sign of moral failure. Sweets are rationed like treasure, while medicinal treat licorice root or tonic biscuits are handed out as if they're indulgences. Though they bring none of the joy, of course, these diets never last. Just as you resign yourself to a month of semolina pudding, a new trend sweeps the household: dry toast and boiled turnips, or an all-pickle regime. Fads fade as quickly as they arrive, but not before etching vivid memories and the occasional nervous tick whenever someone mentions health bread. In the end, you become an expert at pretending to enjoy whatever's on your plate. You develop the palate that distinguishes 17 varieties of boiled starch and can identify the precise difference between potted meat and mystery loaf. If nothing else, Victorian diet fads teach resilience, resourcefulness, and the fine art of hiding unwanted food in the nearest potted plant. And that, every Victorian parent will tell you's character-building Christmas arrives in a flurry of anxiety and pine needles. You receive a single toy, a cold orange, and stern reminders not to play too loudly. Everyone is deeply sentimental, slightly ill from last night's roast goose. Victorian Christmas is less a holiday and more an endurance trial, blending cheer with rigid protocol. Weeks beforehand, the family launches a full assault on the drawing room, dusting, polishing, and debating whether holly or mistletoe poses a greater threat to the cat. The house fills with the scent of dried oranges, studded with cloves and the quiet panic of realizing the plum pudding was never ordered. The Christmas tree, a prickly marvel, imported from Germany and popularized by Queen Victoria's, erected with military precision. You and your siblings are helping, which means standing still, not touching anything, and absolutely not attempting to hang the glass baubles that have survived since the reign of George IV. Each ornament comes with a story, recounted in excruciating detail by an elder relative. Candles are clipped to the branches, then immediately guarded by the entire household and a bucket of sand. Fire hazards are a cherished tradition. On Christmas morning, you rise early, trembling with equal parts excitement and cold. Gifts are modest, almost symbolic: a painted wooden animal, a hand-knitted scarf, or the long-awaited orange citrus royalty in a world without refrigeration. No one receives batteries, partly because they haven't been invented, but mostly because your toys run on imagination and hope. Breakfast is a quiet affair, the calm before the feast, bread, perhaps a sliver of cheese. And if your mother is feeling magnanimous, a dab of homemade jam. You're warned not to spoil your appetite. Though, the real challenge is locating. Children are herded into a corner to play quietly with new treasures. Those who make too much noise are exiled to rehearse carols with the least musical relative in the house. The main event is Christmas dinner, triumph of Victorian excess. The table groans under roast goose or, if fortune smiles, turkey. Mountains of potatoes, mince pies, and the ever-mysterious boiled pudding, doused in brandy and set aflame for dramatic effect. Felders clap approvingly. Children gasp. Someone inevitably tries to extinguish the flames with a lace napkin. No meal is complete without speeches rambling toasts to Queen. Country and family resilience. Sentiment flows like weak sherry. Parents reminisce about Christmases past, each tale more improbable than the last. When I was your age, we made do with a single walnut. A sweet grandfather insists the pudding was grander, the weather fiercer, and the oranges juicier. After dinner comes enforced merriment. Parlor games with rules so convoluted, no one wins. Dramatic readings of Dickens and, for the bold, a bracing walk in the icy garden to aid digestion and reflect on your many blessings. You must thank every adult for your gifts, regardless of whether you asked for socks, needed socks, or can even identify the item as socks. By evening, the mood is a blend of exhaustion, satisfaction, and mild indigestion. As gaslights flicker and wind rattles the panes, you gather to sing Karozovsky, heartfelt and at least half a verse out of sync. Adults exchange tired smiles. Children, sticky with dried fruit and sentiment, begin plotting how to stretch the magic just a little longer. A Victorian Christmas is a masterclass in gratitude, patience, and not setting the house on fire. As you finally collapse into bed, you clutch your orange, your one precious toy, and memories of laughter and chaos. You're reminded once more that the true tradition is surviving it all, with most of your dignity and your Christmas stocking intact. Pets are for building character and resilience. You might have a dog, a canary, or a surprisingly aggressive hedgehog. More likely, your constant companions are the family lice cheerfully ignored by everyone except Nanny, who wields a fine-toothed comb and 1,000-yard stare in the Victorian nursery. Animal companionship comes in many forms, some welcome, some accidental, most uninvited. If you're fortunate, your family owns a small small, nervous terrier that spends its life barking at Coleman and shedding on every surface. There might be a caged canary, endlessly chirping in the window, or for the adventurous a hedgehog acquired during a bout of naturalist enthusiasm and immediately regretted when it began treating the nursery rug as a personal obstacle course. Pets are seen as moral instructors. Dogs teach loyalty. Canaries, patience. Hedgehogs, humility mostly. Children are tasked with feeding, cleaning, and retrieving animals from places they shouldn't be, under the grand piano, halfway up the kitchen chimney, or nestled in a drawer of undergarments. Responsibility is encouraged, but so is stoicism. When a hamster meets an untimely end, it's buried in the garden with a Bible verse and a brisk reminder that dust returns to dust. Sentimentality is reserved for expensive ponies and the rare goose who survives Christmas. But for every official pet, there's a horde of unofficial ones. The nursery teams with life, spiders in corners, ants parading after jam spills, house flies in constant formation, bedbugs nest in your mattress, mice hold secret meetings in the wains, lice set up shop in your hair, treated as a fact of life, fanned proof that all are equal before God, and insects. Pest control is creative, if ineffective. Sticky paper traps dangle from ceilings, faintly vinegary. Lavender sachets hide under pillows to repel moths. The cat hired to hunt mice prefers sunbathing and looking offended when all else fails. Your mother recommends a brisk airing and a little household courage, code for pretending. You don't see anything crawling. Sometimes pets and pests blur. Siblings might adopt a clever mouse, naming it and sneaking it cheese until it becomes a semi-tolerated household member. One memorable season. Your brother tries raising tadpoles in the water, Jug leading to an awkward incident at bath time and a new rule. No amphibians in the nursery. There are animal escapades. The dog chewing a priceless heirloom. The hedgehog escaping into the linen drawer. The canary perching on the Christmas tree and refusing to descend. Until bribed with the last Karen bun, every mishap becomes family lore. Polished with retelling until it borders on myth. Caring for living, things official or otherwise, teaches ingenuity. You learn to build tiny houses from matchboxes, dig elaborate burial plots, and identify flea bites with the expertise of a small, itchy dermatologist. Lice are combed out methodically on bath nights. If discussed at all, they're treated as proof of shared humanity. Through it all, you develop a peculiar blend of empathy, stoicism, and practice. You mourn lost pets with sincere, if brief, grief. You accept the less glamorous side of animal care. When you see a modern pet, store gleaming, odorless, orderly, you marvel at a world where animals are only companions, never intruders. In the end, the creatures of your Victorian childhood, whether tolerated or merely survived, leave their mark as you drift off to sleep. The sounds of a dog sighing, a canary trilling, and a mouse nibbling. A forgotten biscuit remind you. In the zoo of the nursery, at least you're never alone. Play is strictly supervised and always educational. Wealthy children receive rocking horses and geography puzzles. Poor children play with sticks and whatever small rodents they can catch. The amount of fun is directly proportional to how many layers you're wearing. In the grand social theater of the Victorian era, even leisure is performance. Nowhere is this clearer than in children's games in grand houses. The nursery overflows with elaborate toys, hand-painted rocking horses, intricate dollhouses, geography puzzles with colonies, helpfully shaded pink. These are meant to develop the mind Victorian shorthand for reminding you of the British Empire at every turn. You're expected to memorize rivers, mountains, and why Wales isn't technically a country before you're allowed near the toy chest. Yet even among the privileged, play isn't wild or carefree. Nanny hovers at the doorway, ready to intervene at the first sign of unsanctioned joy. Outdoor games must be refined, croquet in the country or a careful game of hopscotch in the drawing room. Shouting, running, and especially laughing too loudly are discouraged. Children with loose morals make too much noise. Goes the family proverb. For working-class children, games are improvised masterpieces. The street is your playground. The world, your toy box. You might roll a hoop down an alley, stage epic battles with a stick and imagination, or trade bottle caps for the privilege of sitting on the least splintery curb. If you catch a mouse, you might race it though. Victorian mice are notoriously unionized and prone to work stoppages. Clothing deepens the divide. Rich children are swaddled in petticoats and sailor suits, so elaborate that any attempt to run ends in collapse. Poor children wear hand-me-down boots, 2 sizes too big, and whatever shirt survived last winter. The richer you are, the more likely you are to get tangled and laced while climbing a tree. The poorer you are, the more likely you are to fall out and not notice until supper. Games of make-believe reveal your station. In wealthy homes, you host imaginary tea parties for dolls with haunted eyes. In working-class alleys, you play shop, factory, or dodge the constable, all rendered with a realism that would make Dickens weep. If you're especially unlucky, your game is help bring in the laundry before it rains, a pastime offering all the thrill of an unpaid internship. Some games cross class lines. Marbles are played with equal passion in drawing rooms and back alleys though. The rich use glass, the poor clay or rolled bread. Skipping rope is another favorite. but wealthy children must recite French verbs while jumping, while others are free to shout rude rhymes at passing carriages. Every game is a lesson in hierarchy. Older children boss the younger. The cleverest invent the rules. The fastest keep their shoes the longest. Cheating is frowned upon unless you're very good at it or very good at not getting caught. Prizes are rare, a sweet, a penny, or the right to sleep nearest the fire. Yet, despite rules and rags, fun finds a way. You laugh, compete, and occasionally conspire against adults who fail to appreciate the glory of a well-aimed mud pie. 4. A few precious minutes, class melts away. What matters is who jumps highest, runs fastest, or guards their marble collection from the family cat. When play ends, whether you return to a nursery full of toys or a room with nothing but a well-loved stick, you know you've survived another day in the greatest game of all. Being a child in Victorian England, outside, the streets are a perilous obstacle course of runaway horses, mysterious puddles, and chimney sweeps. You're warned daily about bad influences and the dangers of fresh air. Every Victorian child, whether from a grand house or a cramped attic, knows that stepping onto the street is an adventure. It's a real-life game of snakes and ladders, but with more actual snakes, escaped pets, and fewer ladders, unless you count those carried by chimney sweeps. Before you even cross the threshold, your parents issue stern warnings. Don't speak to strangers. Don't pick up anything that isn't yours. And above all, if you see a puddle, cross the street. The reason is never explained, but one misstep reveals all. The true depth of a Victorian puddle is always a surprise, and usually a disappointment. The city assaults. You clutch your coin purse. If you have one sidestep, suspicious splatters, and stay alert. Pickpockets aren't just in novels, they're in training on every corner. Crossing the street is an event. Horses always have right of way and most don't care to see you. Hansom cabs race past, drivers yelling at everyone and everything. Milk carts and fishmongers barrel along, leaving trails of slosh and, on good days, a bit of free fish. If you're not careful, you'll be splashed, jostled, and shouted at all at once, by the end of a single errand. Your boots carry enough mud to plant a garden, and your ears hold enough gossip to write a serialized novel. Chimney sweep boys, often your age or younger, dart through traffic, faces black with soot, eyes gleaming with the wild energy of children who climb for a living. You're told never to speak to them, but you can't help exchanging grins or secret salutes. They know all the shortcuts and hidden places. Lose a marble, a penny, or a younger sibling. They're the ones to ask. Sometimes, if you're feeling daring, you join the local urchins in a game of chase-dodging wheelbarrows. Shopkeepers, and if luck holds, the family solicitor. Bad influences, according to Victorian parents, lurk everywhere. Street performers, newsboys, hawking penny dreadfuls, and especially shoeless children. You're expected to avoid anyone whistling, spitting, or looking like they've recently won or lost a fight. Come home with a new accent, a torn cuff, or a suspiciously elaborate ghost story from the baker's alley, and you'll face an interrogation worthy of Scotland Yard. And then there's the air itself. Victorian fresh air is an acquired, equal parts coal smoke, manure, and unidentifiable miasmas. You're made to wear a scarf against the damp and scolded for the slightest cough. Yet for all its dangers, there's thrill in the chaos, watching street sweepers race the rain, glimpsing a puppet show, or simply outrunning the child next door. Returning home is its own trial. You're inspected for bruises, missing buttons, and signs of moral decay. Muddy boots are left at the door. Pockets are searched for contraband. Faces are scrubbed with such vigor you suspect half your freckles vanish. You may not have found fortune, but you've survived another day in history's greatest obstacle course. A Victorian street. As you fall asleep, the shouts and songs of the city linger in your dreams, daring you to brave it all again tomorrow. Your future is decided early. Boys are sent to preparatory school to learn Latin and cricket. Girls to finishing school to perfect the art of fainting. Both are taught that emotions are best suppressed until adulthood, or at least until the next social engagement in the Victorian world. Education is less about knowledge and more about becoming a proper example of your gender. For boys, school is a battlefield lined with Latin declensions, algebraic misery, and cricket matches played in downpours that would make a duck reconsider its life choices. Boys must become robust, serious, and above all, quietly miserable in pursuit of academic and athletic glory. Days are rigidly structured. Chapel, arithmetic, history, a quick scuffle behind the gymnasium, and handwriting practice so strict that ink blots are treated as high treason. Lessons are wide-ranging and bewildering. You must memorize classical poetry, recite multiplication tables, backward and parse Latin sentences, written by men who never sharpened their own quills. Science involves dissecting creatures fairly certain were alive that morning. Geography is taught with maps where vast regions are labeled British interests. The crown jewel of a boy's education is cricket, played rain or shine. Governed by rules no one understands, except the headmaster, and possibly the gardener's dog. For girls, education is a different affair, less boot camp, more tea party, but with its own terrors. Finishing school is less about completing an education, and more about erasing any trace of independent thought. The curriculum includes French conversation, mostly about weather and embroidery, watercolor paintings of forget-me-nots, and endless pianoforte. Practice always with gloves, so your hands remain as soft as your opinions. The focus is on accomplishments. Can you paint a rose? Pour tea without spilling. Faint gracefully if someone mentions Paris in mixed company. You're taught to glide into a room, speak softly enough to be heard only by a canary, and voice opinions only on weather, Shakespearean heroines, or floral arrangements. Arithmetic is minimal lest it strain the female constitution. Literature is filtered through a lens of moral improvement. Emotional repression is the order of the day. Boys must never cry unless struck by a cricket ball, and even then, only in Latin. Girls may faint, but tears are reserved for moments of high drama, or receiving substandard lace. Anger, excitement, and anything resembling ambition are to be tightly contained released. If ever, only in the privacy of one's diary or during an especially vigorous session of embroidery. The divide extends to play as well. Boys may wrestle, shout, and stage elaborate war games under the watchful eye of a master who pretends not to notice. Girls are expected to play croquet, take gentle walks, or organize doll parades where the only conflict is over who gets to be duchess. If a girl is caught climbing a tree, or a boy is found knitting, a family conference is convened, a stern letter drafted to the Times, and a week of corrective reading surely follows. Then yet, despite all this, secret rebellions thrive. Boys pass novels beneath desks. Girls trade whispered tallies of intrepid lady explorers. Both dream of a world where education means more than rote memorization and mastering the art of the impassive expression. The fortunate ones find a sympathetic governess or an eccentric uncle willing to slip them a copy of the Pickwick Papers or a kite when no one is looking. In the end, Victorian education succeeds in one crucial way. It trains you to be a master of social camouflage, an expert at masking boredom, and a connoisseur of the long, meaningful sigh. Whether you're conjugating Latin verbs or arranging violets in a vase, you're learning what it means to be Victorian and how to endure until the next acceptable pause in decorum. Teething is an ordeal for everyone. Victorian parents prescribe everything from bread crusts to brandy, and if that fails, there's always the ever-popular Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, guaranteed to render the child unconscious for a stretch of hours that would raise eyebrows. Today, in the Victorian nursery, the arrival of teeth is less a milestone and more a collective trial by fire. For the baby, it means endless drooling, flushed cheeks, and an overwhelming urge to gnaw on anything that stays still long enough, including the cat, the rug's corner, or a bone rattle with eyes that seem to follow you. For parents, it's a season of desperate remedies as they cycle through their arsenal in hopes of silencing midnight wails and preserving their own sanity. First comes the Thymenard bread crust, presented with the solemnity of a royal scepter. The logic is simple. Toughen the gums by letting the child chew on yesterday's loaf, now hardened to the consistency of petrified wood. If any comforter, even a crumb, is extracted, you're already tougher than most. If not, the remedy escalates to spirits. Brandy is dabbed on the gums for medicinal purposes, resulting in a generation of infants with a suspiciously high tolerance for liquor and a tendency to nap through thunderstorms. But nothing in the Victorian era rivals the legendary status of Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. Marketed as a miracle cure for teething, colic, fussiness, and general dissatisfaction with life, its secret lies in a blend of morphine, alcohol, and a few soothing herbs. Today, it would require a prescription and prompt a visit from Child Protective Services. Parents sing its praises. He slept through the night, and so did we, while quietly ignoring the fact that the baby has been smiling vacantly at the wallpaper for days when the syrup is unavailable. Alternatives include teething powders, cooling drafts, or, if you're especially unlucky, coral beads strung on a ribbon and tied around the neck for protection. The family medicine chest soon resembles an alchemist's workshop, filled with vials and jars labeled in elegant script but containing substances likely banned in multiple nations. The ordeal isn't confined to the home. Visiting relatives arrive with advice both archaic and ominous. Rub the gums with honey, botulism be damned. Let the child gnaw on a silver spoon, ideal if you're aristocracy. Or simply air out the baby, which usually means placing them in a pram by an open window and hoping the breeze accomplishes what narcotics could not. Teething isn't just hard on the infant. The entire household lives under siege, tiptoeing past the nursery, ears tuned for the first cry. Older siblings are conscripted into entertainment duty, staging puppet shows and slapstick routines, none of which impress a baby who only wants to chew on their pinafore hem when the teeth finally emerge. There's a brief, collective sigh of relief. Parents breathe easier. Nannies pour themselves a quiet, celebratory sherry. And the baby, now armed with a new set of weapons, turns their attention to biting everyone within reach. It's another Victorian rite of passage, survived through grit, improvisation, and a stunning disregard for dosage instructions. Looking back, you realize teething wasn't just about growing teeth. It was the first test of the resilience you'd need for a lifetime of lead paint, arsenic-dyed curtains, and breakfasts of unidentifiable gruel. If you made it through your first year without permanently numbing your tongue, you were clearly destined for great things, or at the very least, for a V. Occasionally, you're marched into the countryside for healthful exercise. bundled in enough layers to muffle a sneeze, and strictly forbidden from touching anything interesting. Nature is deemed educational, but only if observed from a safe, mud-free distance. A Victorian nature walk is less an adventure and more a moving lesson in caution. Adults, armed with walking sticks, wicker baskets, and enough anxiety to power a steam engine, usher you and your siblings out, the door hats, secured, gloves, buttoned to the elbows. Any complaint about the weather is met with the timeless retort: there is no such thing as bad weather, only weak constitutions. You may have dreamed of wild romps through meadows, but instead you're paraded down the lane like a procession of wool-clad ducklings. Nanny scans the horizon for threats, puddles, low branches, and worst of all, stray dogs. Your instinct to leap into a hedgerow is met with a withering glance and a lecture on the diseases lurking in untamed greenery. You may admire flowers, but only from afar, and only after reciting their Latin names. Pluck so much as a buttercup, and your gloves will be scrutinized for moral laxity. Approved activities include pointing politely at cloud formations, noting leaf shapes, and asking questions that can be answered with a firm that's not suitable. For children, bird song is to be appreciated in silence, never imitated. Tree climbing is forbidden. So is running, shouting, or anything that might draw the attention of a passing vicar. Your greatest hope is permission to sketch a daffodil, or collect a perfectly clean stone, both of which will later be confiscated, dusted, and possibly boiled for safety. And yet, despite these constraints, there's quiet magic in these outings. The countryside unfolds in patchworks of meadow and woodland, scented with new grass and distant livestock. Even persistent drizzle can't entirely smother your curiosity. Sometimes you glimpse something thrilling: a rabbit vanishing into brush, a cluster of wild berries, a fox darting across a field just before an adult begins a moral parable about cunning or providence. Every walk is an opportunity for improvement. You might be asked to recite poetry to a skylark, as a favorite, or sketch an acorn with feeling and precision. You're quizzed on cloud types and the proper way to address a gardener. Show the slightest enthusiasm, and you'll be reminded that true appreciation for nature is quiet, contemplative, and preferably devoid of visible joy. If you're especially fortunate, you might be allowed to wade in a shallow brook, but only after a thorough risk assessment. And so many layers that falling in would result in floating until fished out with an umbrella. You return home, clean in reality, though muddy in dreams, trace of earth scrubbed away by vigorous brushing and the stern scrape of a boot scraper. Of course, some children find ways to rebel. A quick dash behind a hedge, a secret pocketful of snails, a forbidden game of who can jump farthest. When adults turn their backs, these become the stuff of nursery legend. You learn to treasure every stolen moment of wildness, every dandelion puff snatched on the sly, every grass stain hidden until laundry day. In the end, the Victorian nature walk is a paradox. You're out in the world, yet bound by layers of wool and etiquette. But even through the fabric, you catch glimpses of the wildness just beyond the patha. Reminder that childhood is less about obeying rules and more about finding wonder in spite of them. The Victorians adore a good haunting. You grow up terrified of everything from jack-o'-lanterns to miasmas. Every unexplained cough is blamed on a nearby ghost, and you're expected to keep your soul as tidy as your linens. The nursery thrums with whispers and shadows. Every creak in the floorboards, every flicker of candlelight, is an invitation for an older sibling or mischievous uncle to declare the house haunted. If you're told never to whistle, indoors it summons spirits. Always cross yourself before passing. A mirror, at night. That's how ghosts get in. And never open windows after dark. Lest miasmas or something worse drift inside, sneeze 3 times in succession. And someone will make the sign of the cross and press a piece of bread into your hand, just in case. Superstition is woven into the fabric of daily life. Drop a fork at dinner? A visitor is coming. Possibly spectral, definitely muddy. Spill salt. A near-apocalyptic event requiring an immediate pinch tossed over the left shoulder to blind the devil. Step over a broom you'll never marry. A black cat crosses your path. Turn around, go home, and reevaluate all your life choices. Bedtime is when the dread deepens. The stories begin. Haunted attics, wandering souls, vengeful spirits who despise children who giggle after sunset. You lie awake, heart pounding, watching shadows stretch across the Arsena green wallpaper. Convinced every draft is the breath of something otherworldly. Thunderstorms become gothic theater. The winds howl, surely the wail of the restless dead. And if the clock ever strikes 30, well, best not speak of that at all. Guilt and fear are constant companions. Every misdeed, stealing a jam tart, tracking mud onto the stair, runner is certain to attract supernatural retribution. Ghosts, you're assured, favor the naughty, the lazy, and the disrespectful. You become adept at confession and apology, just in case a spirit is lurking, taking notes for infernal records. Holidays brim with supernatural anxiety. At Halloween, jack-o'-lanterns aren't for fun. They're carved to ward off spirits roaming on All Hallows' Eve. On Christmas Eve, you gather by candlelight to hear ghost stories, shivering not just from the cold, but from the thought that great-uncle Frederick might appear in the doorway, eager for seconds of pudding. Even chores are governed by omens. Stir the Christmas pudding clockwise for luck. Never rock an empty cradle, it invites tragedy. Finding a spider in your shoe is either good fortune or a sign you need new footwear, depending on which aunt you ask. Dream of teeth falling out? Don't mention it. Before breakfast or the whole family might be in mourning by spring. Yet, amid the dread, there's comfort in superstition. It offers logic for the unexplainable, a way to make sense of drafty rooms, mysterious rashes, and why the nursery always feels colder after sunset. You whisper protective charms, avoid ladders, and scan for omens. Hoping to navigate childhood without drawing the notice of the spectral bureaucracy. In the end, you grow up with a sixth sense for the uncanny. Every shadow tells a story. Every unexplained itch carries a warning from beyond. Victorian superstitions may fill you with fear, but they also fill your childhood with drama, ritual, and a lifelong respect for salt shakers. So you tuck yourself in, say your prayers, and remind yourself, as long as your soul is tidy and your bread is handy, you might just make it through the night, ghosts and all. Puberty arrives without warning and absolutely no explanation. Victorian parents handle it by pretending it doesn't exist, leaving you to decipher adolescence using only a medical encyclopedia and your older cousins. Terrifying anecdotes one day. You're playing marbles in the nursery. The next, you're sent upstairs to rest for what feels like an eternity. Your body begins to betray you in every imaginable way. You grow in places that shouldn't grow, squeak when you mean to speak, and develop a sudden, mortifying awareness of your elbows. Spots bloom overnight. Hair behaves unpredictably. You become taller than your mother, and more awkward than a newborn calf on ice. The official Victorian response is silence. The word puberty is never spoken. Ask your parents what's happening, and they'll direct you to the family library. where the medical encyclopedia offers vague, alarming illustrations and advice like cultivate fortitude, avoid excessive reading, take cold baths daily. The chapter on the change runs 3 pages, 2 of which list symptoms that may include unusual dreams, secret thoughts, and fits of inexplicable giggling. Practical guidance comes in cryptic warnings. Sit up straight, chewer. Getting a stoop, your father mutters. Don't eat too much cheese at supper, or you'll get ideas, your mother says, as if imparting ancient wisdom. No one explains what kind of ideas. Complain of new aches, and you're given a tonic like Dr. Fortitude's, invigorating, solution tasting of nail polish remover, and probably 40% gin. Girls receive a particularly bewildering crash course in modesty. The day you're handed a packet of mysterious blue ribbons, you know something's afoot. Ask your mother, and she blushes, recommending extra prayers. The women of the household grow tight-lipped, offering advice like never sit on cold steps and don't run after tea. Faint in public, and everyone nods, knowingly, then changes the subject. For boys, the transition is equally opaque and considerably itchier. Suddenly, you're expected to spend hours at cricket, recite poetry with newfound gravity, and abandon tree climbing, though you secretly crave it more than ever. Older cousins corner you with alarming tales involving sudden whiskers, wrestling, behind the stables, and the necessity of always carrying a handkerchief for emergencies. Your skin rebels. Your voice mutinies. You become acutely aware of other people, girls, boys, the baker's apprentice, sometimes all at once, with the intensity of a 3-volume novel. Courtship, according to the family manual, is best conducted at a distance by letter, in the presence of 4 chaperones and a dog. Your first crush is a secret agony, confessed only to your diary and possibly the family dog. The greatest challenge is managing emotion. Victorian children are trained to suppress feelings, but adolescence is a storm of sensation. Rage, joy, embarrassment, existential dread. Eventually, you emerge battered but wiser, with a new appreciation for quiet corners and the ability to project calm while panicking within. You look back on your Victorian adolescence as a time of mystery, confusion, and remarkably strong. By the time you join the adult table, you understand why everyone pretends not to notice what's happening with the teenagers. Some things, in the grand tradition of the era, are simply better left unsaid. Bedtime means a brisk prayer, a cautionary tale about pride, and perhaps a spoonful of a sedative sleeping draught. The house creaks. The gas lamps hiss. You drift off, grateful to have survived another day at least until the next mysterious rash appears. Evening routine is a ceremony of winding down, though not as we know it today. There's no gentle lullaby, no tales of kindly bears. Instead, you kneel at your iron-framed bed for a rapid-fire prayer swift enough to avoid chills, solemn enough to deter listening ghosts. The nursery is cold, the fire's long out, your nightshirt is 2 sizes too large, handed down from a cousin who supposedly survived fever by wearing enough flannel. After prayer comes the bedtime story, though story is generous. Most nights, it's a morality tale, whispered by nanny or an elder sibling, cautionary fables of pride, greed, or the fate of children who talk back. The message is clear. Virtue is rewarded. Naughtiness is punished hilariously. You hear of the boy who ran indoors and was struck by lightning, or the girl who forgot her manners and was carried off by a stoat. No pressure if your parents feel especially modern. They might offer a book, usually Pilgrim's Progress, or something slightly less terrifying, from the shelf of improving literature. You clutch it under scratchy blankets, trying not to notice the wallpaper peeling in the moonlight or the faint whiff of camphor from the medicine chest. The house makes noises. Floorboards groan, wind rattles panes. Someone coughs in a way that suggests they've just seen a ghost, or at least the cat. For the restless, or especially unlucky, there's the sleeping draught. Victorian pharmacology is enthusiastic. A spoonful of syrup, promising restful sleep and containing enough opium to tranquilize a bear. Protest, and you're reminded that Aunt Belinda took it nightly and lived to the impressive age of 34. The draught tastes of licorice, regret, and half-remembered nightmares. Soon, you're drifting in and out of consciousness, grateful to be spared the house's nocturnal symphony. Bedtime isn't all terror. There are small comforts. The soft thump of a sibling's foot from the next bed. The distant clatter of a late carriage. The warm, conspiratorial feeling of having survived another day together. You whisper plans for tomorrow, daring escapes. Extra marmalade. Dilnani's sharp shush restores order. You lie awake, watching shadows dance across the ceiling, wondering what tomorrow will bring. A new rash, perhaps, or a strange spot requiring 3 ointments and a lecture on. Drat. You're not alone. The nursery hums with small sounds, the rustle of a mouse, the sigh of wind, the rhythmic snore of the dog curled by the cold hearth. Even the house seems to settle, as if relieved that everyone is safely abed. Eventually. Sleep arrives not gently, but completely brought on by exhaustion, moral lessons, and just enough tranquilizer. You dream of haunted nurseries, strange adventures, and endless bowls of gruel. If you're lucky, you wake stiff, itchy, but ready to face another day in the wild, weird world of Victorian childhood. And as you blink away sleep, you remember. The surviving bedtime is its own kind of victory. Potty training in the Victorian era is less about stickers and praise, more about public shame and an endless array of porcelain paraphernalia. Your personal chamber pot is decorated with whimsical flowers or, if you're unfortunate, stern moral warnings. There's no flushing, only a brisk trip to the backyard for the night soil man, whose job description surely includes hazard pay. You learn quickly. Accidents mean lectures. Missing the pot is a crime best concealed until the next maid's day off. For a Victorian child, the chamber pot is both necessity and humiliation. It lurks beneath the bed or behind the nursery sofa, always at risk of discovery at the worst moment. Some pots are painted with cherubs or jolly geese. Others bear warnings, like cleanliness is next to godliness, or look before you leap. The message is clear. This is a moral endeavor, not a remessa. Biological 1. Lessons in bathroom etiquette begin early. Nanny, or mother, delivers a speech on proper comportment, using phrases like timely evacuation and don't make a spectacle of yourself. You're taught to ask politely, avoid rushing, and above all, never discuss your business. At the breakfast table, do so, and expect scandalized gasps and a session in the reflection chair. The act itself is fraught. The pot is small, unsteady, prone to sliding at the critical moment. Success earns a nod of approval. A misfire requires swift cover, ideally blame shifted to a sibling or the family dog. Housemaids mutter as they empty it each morning. The night soil man rattles through the alley, a living reminder that Victorian plumbing ends at the kitchen sink. Potty training is public knowledge in a way modern children can't fathom. Older siblings delight in horror stories. Remember when Cousin Edmund missed the pot, ate cold cabbage for a week, and apologized to the cat? These tales are designed to haunt your dreams and enforce eternal vigilance. Accidents are inevitably treated as cautionary fables. There are no cheerful try-again stickers, only brisk discipline, a change of linen, a warning look, and murmured references to slippery slopes and moral decay. Your mistakes are dissected quietly but thoroughly, until you vow never to let it happen again, even if it means holding. Out through a night of howling wind and creaking floors, in the event of catastrophe, a tipped pot, a midnight mishap, or, heaven forbid, using the wrong chamber in the dark, the consequences are immediate. Sheets are stripped, windows flung open, vinegar splashed liberally. Nanny lectures on bladder control and discipline. You resolve to avoid liquids after meals and map escape routes to the pot for future emergencies. For many, the greatest dread is the transition to the outdoor privia, journey undertaken in all weather. Armed with a lantern, an oversized shawl, and the determination of a polar explorer. The privy is cold, drafty, and filled with mysteries, spiders echoing drips, and a smell that could strip paint. You're told this builds character. It certainly builds memory. Despite it all, you adapt. You master the art of balance, the value of discretion, and the importance of a quick getaway. The chamber pot becomes a fact of life, a symbol of Victorian ingenuity, resilience, and the unshakable belief that moral virtue could be encouraged, if not enforced, one uncomfortable trip at a time. You survive Victorian potty training with caution, humility, and a healthy respect for porcelain. In a world without plumbing, you do what you must stand with luck. Avoid cabbage-based punishments for another day. Getting dressed in Victorian times is a full-contact sport. Whether you're 5 or 15, the number of buttons, buckles, and laces per outfit rivals a legal document in complexity. Young girls wrestle with miniature corsets. Boys are strangled by starched collars. Everyone wears at least 3 layers, regardless of the weather. Nothing says childhood freedom like sweating through a wool waistcoat in summer while your mother fusses over asymmetrical shoelaces. Your day begins not with a stretch, but with Nanny flinging open the curtains and declaring that idleness breeds wrinkles and ruin. Before you can protest, the daily battle with clothing begins. Each garment awaits in a formidable stack at the foot of your bed. Petticoats, chemises, drawers, stockings, garters, undershirts, and, if you're especially unfortunate, a sailor suit requiring 3 adults and knowledge of maritime knots. For girls, the first obstacle is the corset known in the family as the embrace of discipline. A child's corset is meant to encourage perfect posture and, presumably, an early sense of despair. Nanny laces it with the skill of a competitive sailor, pulling until you feel taller, thinner, and significantly less able to inhale. Complain, and you're reminded that Queen Victoria wore tighter stays on. Look how well she turned out. Boys contend with the collar starched, upright, and seemingly designed by a medieval torturer. Each morning, your mother positions you before the mirror, tugs the collar to your chin, and inspects her work like a sculptor preparing marble for exhibition. Any attempt to loosen it earns a sharp glance and the warning that a droopy collar is the first step toward moral collapse. You practice posture by balancing a book on your head, while Nanny checks cuffs for rogue folds and signs of frivolous living. Layering isn't optional, it's sacred ritual. Summer or winter, indoors or out, you're swaddled in wool, flannel, and occasionally velvet, because children are delicate and must be insulated at all times. This belief persists even as you grow slick with sweat and silently pray for a breeze or a convenient fainting spell. You're warned never to remove a layer, lest you catch a chill and bring shame upon the household. Dressing is so exhausting, it nearly counts as exercise. Socks sag, garters snap. Buttons vanish with Houdini-like skill, ribbons tangle, sashes slip, and the family dog. Ostensibly helping, the family dog steals your best glove and buries it in the garden. By the time you're finally dressed, you feel less like a child and more like a trust-up, exhibit unsure whether to venture outdoors or simply collapse back into bed for a well-earned rest. Accidents.
Mothers notice every loose thread and treat each wardrobe malfunction as an opportunity for moral refinement. A stitch in time saves embarrassment at tea. Special occasions bring heightened dangers. Lace collars fastened with microscopic hooks. Hats pinned to your scalp with a zeal bordering on cruelty. And shoes so constricting they might as well belong to another species entirely. You sit for the family portrait in silent agony, pinched, itchy, and practicing the rigid, wide-eyed smile that future generations will mistake for Victorian stoicism. Yet, through the sweat, the pinches, and the endless scolding, you cultivate agility, patience, and a deep fondness for rare moments barefoot. By the end of the day, you peel off your layers with quiet triumph, marvel at your continued survival, and drift to sleep your dreams, haunted by the whisper of petticoats and the ever-present click of mother's mending scissors, always ready for tomorrow's sartorial skirmish. Getting dressed in the Victorian era is a full-contact sport. Whether young or nearly grown, the sheer number of buttons, buckles, and laces in a single outfit rivals the complexity of legal documentation. Girls wrestle with miniature corsets. Boys are slowly strangled by starched collars. Everyone wears a minimum of 3 layers, regardless of season, setting, or sanity. Nothing captures the spirit of childhood freedom quite like sweltering in a wool waistcoat while your mother frets over asymmetrical shoelaces. Mornings begin not with a gentle stretch, but with a declaration of war. Nanny throws open the curtains, the chill sweeps in, and you're reminded that respite is not part of the daily schedule. Your garments await in a neat but daunting tower petticoat. Drawers, chemises, stockings, garters, undershirts, waistcoats, shirt sand, if you're especially unfortunate. A sailor suit whose neckerchief was last tied correctly by a gratin. The day's first trial is the corset, even for children. These stays are said to shape both posture and character. Laced with the vigor usually reserved for securing cargo, the effect is less supportive and more skeletal, designed to create a ladylike silhouette, while incidentally preventing deep breaths until adulthood. Movement is limited to gliding, shuffling, or the occasional well-timed collapse onto a fainting couch. Boys face their own torments, collars so stiff they could double as splints, and shoes requiring 2 adults, a boot, and divine intervention to remove. Mornings are spent balancing books on your head to perfect posture, while Nanny scrutinizes your cuffs for signs of frivolous living. Think you're clever by loosening a button. Beware, mothers possess an uncanny ability to detect even the faintest asymmetry from across the room. Layering isn't merely encouraged, it's compulsory. Summer or winter, indoors or out, you're encased in wool, flannel, and on daring days velvet. Adults insist this is necessary because children are naturally delicate and must be insulated at all times. This reasoning feels particularly curious when you're drenched in sweat, scratching at woolen seams, and silently weighing the social acceptability of fainting before your first meal. The act of dressing is so taxing it qualifies as physical training. Socks droop. Garters give way. Buttons seem engineered to vanish the moment attention wavers. Ribbons twist into knots. Laces tangle with malicious intent. And the family dog fur, the helpful companion, darts off with your second-best glove. When you're finally fully attired, you're left questioning whether to face the world or retreat under the covers for recovery. Of course, mishaps are unavoidable. Someone trips over a trailing hem. A sleeve catches in a closing door. Rip a petticoat or lose a button, and you're subjected to a very public mending session, mother treating each flaw as both moral failing and teachable moment. The quietly rebellious dream of garment reduction, plotting to accidentally leave a layer behind on laundry day. Formal events raise the stakes further. Lace collars with hidden hooks, sashes folded according to geometric law, and hats secured to your skull with a force typically reserved for laboratory experiments. Woe to the child with a crooked bonnet, a skewed sash, or boots tainted by honest play. And yet you endure. You grow nimble, resilient, and master the art of sitting perfectly still. You learn to cherish small freedoms, a loosened ribbon, a moment shoeless, the sweet defiance of an untucked shirt tail. You begin to understand why adults rely so heavily on tea-and, why family portraits always carry that faint look of panic in the end. Victorian attire is as much about discipline as it is about decency. You're wrapped in tradition, practicality, and a touch of paranoia, armored not just against weather and world, but against the ever-present threat of moral laxity. When you finally remove the last layer at day's end, you've earned your rest, your resilience. And if fortune smiles, even one peaceful night, with all buttons left blissfully undone, so as you settle into your clean, quiet bed tonight, blessed with central heating and a mattress that doesn't bite back, spare a tender thought for the children of the Victorian age, and the parents who were, in their own anxious way, simply doing their best with guidance drawn from superstition, dubious science, and unfiltered dread. You've survived the nursery gruel, the endless rules, and more household toxins than appear on the periodic table. You've braved lead paint, teething syrups potent enough to sedate a horse, and family portraits so severe they'd frighten off nightmares. And if you reached adulthood, you did so carrying at least 3 moral lessons: a collection of unexplained rashes, and a lifelong suspicion of anything involving cabbage. Let's be honest, Victorian parenting may have been well-meaning, but it was also bizarre, bonkers, and occasionally bordering on criminal. And yet, through all the rigid discipline, questionable remedies, and suffocating layers of wool and undergarments, families held together. Children grew up tough, resourceful, and equipped with survival instincts that would humble even the most seasoned modern prepper. Tonight, as you listen to the soft hum of your fan, perhaps whisper a quiet thank you to your ancestors who endured. Cod liver oil by the spoonful and childhoods, where fresh air sometimes meant dangling in a wire cage above the street. History can be brutal. It can be absurd, but it's also proof that people are stubborn, hopeful, and endlessly inventive in their quest to make it through another day. So relax, breathe easy, let go of whatever small worries you carried to bed. Right now, there's no laudanum in the medicine cabinet, no arsenic in the curtains, and no one demanding you finish your liver pudding. Only the comfort of the present, the quiet luxury of safety, and the gently heroic absurdity of those who came before. Sleep well, and may your dreams be free of mustachioed nannies and peeling poison green wallpaper. Good night.